Another great weekend of URC action. My name is Mark. Let's talk rugby. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to try to make this one a quick one today. I'm aiming for less than 10 minutes, but if you watch my channel a lot, I love to talk about rugby, and sometimes I go way over what I think I'm going to do, but we'll see what we can do. So in this one, we're not going to go too much into detail on the semi-finals. We're just going to talk about, a little bit about them, and then very briefly touch on the final as well, because we're going to have a separate preview. Well, two separate previews of that actually coming this week. And yeah, if you want more details, I've already got, full reviews of each of the semi-finals on the channels. So go and check those out. Okay, so we're going to start with the first of our semi-finals. So it was Leinster 37, Glasgow Warriors 19, and that was at the Aviva Stadium on Saturday. And, we got a very quick start to this one. 2 minutes in, Sheehan is over to score for Leinster. That gets converted by Prendergast. One of the few kicks he actually got at the weekend. But then straight off the kickoff, lovely kick back inside. Horn wins the race to the ball, and then he dots down to get Glasgow back in the game. But after that, then Leinster just kind of took control. So, first half tries by Osborne, then Clarkson, who I thought went really well in the front row, then Sheehan in for his second. Yeah, and at halftime, Leinster with a decent lead. But again, Prendergast did get a penalty as well that first half, but missed the rest of the conversions. And, his kicking definitely a big worry, I think, after that one. Then into the second half, the kind of, Leinster, when they're on form, they always score in, the third quarter, as it were, between 40 and 60 minutes. And they did it in this as well. Osborne in for second, and then Frawley, who could come off the bench, gets in for a try as well. And then towards the end, then, Glasgow Warriors get over for a couple of tries. First of all, Dobie with just, a lovely kind of snipe where, Glasgow looked absolutely out on their feet, and Leinster had numbered up on the outside, but he just kind of used that against Leinster basically by just saying, no, there's a gap here, I'm going for it. And he got over, and, the guys got great pace to do that. And then Tupolatu with a great score as well, like just kind of weaved his way through. I think it was definitely off. Yeah, it was off the line out, I think, and the ball went to him, and he came back on a lovely angle, weaved his way through a few defenders, and then had the strength then to finish in the end. And that guy, fantastic player. Overall, fairly comfortable Leinster, and certainly a much improved performance from them. But still, Glasgow again showed if you can get to width against that Leinster defence, that's where you're going to more than likely beat their scramble. That's where the first try came from. And, you could see like Scarlets had some success doing that as well. Then, from Leinster point of view, some really good performances. I thought the whole front row went well early on. I thought Ryan Baird was outstanding as well. He's a player who kind of, a few seasons ago, he burst on the scenes. He was kind of the galloping giraffe type, right? Where, he was great in the loose and whatever, but maybe his kind of the fundamentals of his game as a back rower maybe weren't quite there. He's worked on that a lot over the last few seasons, and you could see that in this game. I thought as well, Barrett and Osborne went really well in midfield, and they're, a nice combination in there. And it just shows kind of the options that Leinster do have when they decide to use them, or when they have to use them. And then also Tommy O'Brien on the right wing was, brilliant as well. He was just behind Baird for me for player of the game. And he's another one of those players who's really worked hard this season, and he's been rewarded for it. And that's something that Leinster haven't been doing in recent seasons, is rewarding those players who maybe aren't first choice because they're not Ireland internationals, or certainly not as established Ireland internationals as the other players who were there in the squad. But, you know, we saw this season the likes of, you know, Osborne continue to be rewarded. We saw Clarkson getting rewarded. We saw Boyle as well, you know, coming on at loosehead. We've seen both O'Briens, Tommy and Jimmy O'Brien, getting more game time in big games. You know, Frawley kind of like getting rehabilitated almost, like, you know, he had a massive dip in form. And we're seeing all these guys getting to play in the big games. Scott Penny as well, another one there, you know, who's been brilliant for Leinster when the Irish internationals have been away, and they was getting to play in the big games as well with no Van der Fleer there. But for all the good there are worries, certainly. Again, you know, the ability for teams to beat Leinster's defence by getting to width and having pace out wide is a worry, especially, you know, looking towards the final. Then also, you know, the fact that their line out can be a bit hit and miss at times. That, you know, they were disrupting Glasgow's line out at the weekend, but it could be either way in that final. And also the performance of Prendergast, like, he was behind a pretty dominant pack, right? And when he's there, like, ball in hand, he looks fairly decent. Defensively, though, certainly looks like a liability. You know, definitely. Well, most tends get targeted, but certain tends get targeted even more, and he's one of those. And then his performance from the tee, really, really worrying. Like, Leinster, you know, if he's going to start in the final, it means they've got to start somebody who can take over the kicking duties, you know, right from the get-go. You know, if he misses his first couple of kicks, because in a final, lots of finals are decided by a kick or two, and, you know, we need someone in the best of form. Obviously, they're going to work with it on him during the week, but whether they can fix or not is another thing. Like, you know, it's kind of about that temperament, right? Being able to kick under pressure, and you might be able to train someone during the week and they're getting every kick, and then they commit back into the pressure situation and it deserts them. So we'll see what happens there. But good win for Leinster, the best performance in over a month, certainly. Basically since these two met in the quarterfinals of the Champions Cup. So very good performance for Leinster. Glasgow, you know, didn't perform as good as they wanted to, obviously, but, you know, they were worthy champions last year, and their team will feel like they're going to be back in the future as well. You know, Sean, who posts a lot on my videos, was saying, you know, that Nusafora maybe kind of tighten the purse strings in Scotland and maybe reduce some funding and stuff. And I hope that's not true, because that's completely the wrong way to go. You know, we've seen it. If you take away funding from your teams, you're not saving money. You're basically, you know, denying yourself not only success in the future, but also future earnings as well. And you can see that kind of in Wales, what's happened there, where funding taken away from the regions, and, you know, they're struggling hugely, and because, you know, they've been struggling, it means that they've been getting less attendance and therefore less income, and it's kind of, you know, almost a self-fulfilling prophecy by doing that. So, you know, hopefully in Scotland that they have a bit more cop on and they actually fund the game properly. And also for Wales, I hope that they get funded properly as well, because you can see that, you know, from like the Scarlets, the, you know, and Cardiff this season, and also Ospreys last season, that there is potential there, but you've got to help that potential grow. You got to water those seedlings, and you do that by putting investment in. Okay, so that was that semi-final. Leinster 37, Glasgow 19. Now we're going to have a look at the other semi-final, And already I know I'm gone over 10 minutes, so it's going to be probably a 15-minute video. Okay, so our semi-final then was Vodacom Bulls 25, Hollywoodbets Sharks 13. So in this one, kind of a tight affair for a lot of the game, but then second half, then it felt like there was only going to be one winner in the game, honestly. But we start off with the Bulls getting over an early try from de Klerk, and then Kane and Moody then is over from them as well, and then Hendrickson replies with a penalty for the Sharks to kind of keep them somewhat in touch. And just before halftime, then Houston puts over a penalty for the Bulls, which is impressive because at that stage they had Vorster in the bin, and then shortly after that, then Hanacom went to the bin, and then Kutsia right on the stroke of halftime as well. And the Sharks were putting massive pressure on that Bulls line before the break. But the Bulls, obviously infringing in some cases, otherwise they wouldn't have had 3 guys sent to the bin, but they were still able to keep them out and stop them scoring before the break, so that they had a cushion going into that second half. Then in the second half, then still down to 13 men, Mapimpi did get in the corner, and the Sharks, obviously somebody spoke to them, because in that first half, bit of white line fever, keeping it in the forwards, ignoring the fact that they had men over on the left. This time though, they sucked in the defence, and then they did go wide to Mapimpi, who got in. And then after that, Ethan Hooker gets over for another try for the Sharks and brings them a bit closer. And, at that stage, it was 18-15. Was it? I'm just trying to think now. No, it was 15-13, right? And then a few minutes later, Bulls get a penalty. Johannes puts that over and makes it 18-13. And then there's a 5-point lead to the Bulls. But that second half, the Sharks find it very hard to get in positions. And, I talked about before the game as well that, the fact that the Sharks had that extra 20 minutes in their legs from the extra time that they played against Munster, and the whole rigmarole of having to go through that kicking contest as well, would probably catch up to them, and it felt like it did. When the only good thing for the Sharks is that the Bulls are absolutely killing them, just destroying them, blowing them off the ball in the scrums. And when the replacements come on, and even before the replacements come on, actually, in fairness to them, they start getting a little bit of parity. But then after replacements, the Sharks, they didn't get on top, but they got a penalty or two in the scrum themselves. So it wasn't all one-way traffic, which it was. The Bulls just absolutely blew them off a scrum, an attacking scrum, about 10 minutes out from the Bulls line in that first half. But then second half, Sharks kind of brought it back a little bit together. But in the second half, then kind of the last 20 minutes or so, it felt like the team that more likely to score were the Bulls, because they were the ones that were getting into position. They were the ones that had that kind of always, with someone like the Sharks, you've got talented players like Mapimpi, Hooker, Esther Hazen, Yakan Fassi, a fullback as well. Plenty of talent there, and then obviously both Hendrickses. But it felt like it would have to be kind of a a coast to coast type breakout try or whatever from the Sharks, because the Bulls again were the ones putting on the pressure. And also just to mention that both Hendrickses, while taking kicks, slipped over. I think Jaden did it once and Jordan did it twice. So, I just kind of mentioned that it felt like maybe Jack Crowley cursed those guys after Winkgate or wherever, but wherever it was, it was kind of weird that both of them were slipping over on the kicks. And then also, something as well that was interesting was that the fact that, the Bulls kind of got a bit of a G up after the guys all coming back from the bin as well. So I just jokingly referred to them as the bin squad as well, because like it was they're kind of that version of the bomb squad, right? Bringing all the boys back from the bin. But yeah, in the end, like the Bulls, then they're the ones that get in for the final try. Creel getting over, and then Johannes put the conversion, between the posts, and from there, like you couldn't see, like last kind of whatever it was, less than 10 minutes. The Sharks, try as they might, not gonna get themselves back into the game, and that's how it turned out. Like the Bulls just kind of saw the clock. The Sharks are kind of the last minute or so looking just to get a score really before the end, but the Bulls able to turn over and then get the ball off the field, and deservedly into their third final in 4 years. And just to mention as well, in this game as well, the crowd were absolutely brilliant. There was 47,500 people at this game at Loftus Versfeld, and for me, like, feel free to to correct me, but for me, absolutely the best atmosphere at a South African derby that I've seen in the URC, and I've seen plenty of them. I haven't seen them all in the URC, but I've seen probably more than most Europeans, certainly, and maybe more than some South Africans as well, because for when I'm picking games out to watch at the weekends, generally it goes, which games are Irish teams involved in, then looking at, which of where the South African teams are playing, or the Scottish teams. And that's kind of the way I kind of, in my own mind, prioritize the games that I want to watch. Doesn't mean that I don't watch, Italian teams or Welsh teams. It's just, that's kind of my hierarchy, as it were, for watching games. If I could, like, if this is my full-time job, I'd watch every single game, and, probably watch some of them twice as well. But, it's not a kind of a woe is me, but, most people that do this have to do the same, right? You've got to fit it around your own job and your own life. And, so when I prioritize, that's pretty much what I do. So it means that I've watched a lot of South African derbies in the past few years. And yeah, for me, the best atmosphere by a long way, because I've watched a lot of South African derbies where, it's something that really annoys me, is you get the guy on wherever he's the announcer in the stadium or wherever, trying to lead chants and stuff like this. And, it sounds very hollow and very fake. But when, you get two brilliant teams going at each other, and there's a bit of there was a bit of tension, certainly in the first kind of 50 odd minutes of the game, especially when the Sharks started to come back at the Bulls in the opening kind of 10 or 15 minutes of that second half. And, you can feel everyone is invested in the game, and, every little thing, whether it's a great bit of defense or, a knock on or anything like that, or a brilliant scrum, people reacting to it in the crowd, you can really feel it. And then once the Bulls started to, pull away a little bit towards the end, then the party atmosphere came in as well. And you could see, the Bulls fans kind of celebrating, and, for me, yeah, it was absolutely brilliant. It was great. And, want to see more of that in the URC. Sometimes, it's kind of weird, because you look at some of the South African games, and you think, oh, there's nobody in the crowd, but it's because they're playing in massive stadiums compared to a lot of the other URC teams, and they probably have a bigger, crowd, maybe double the size of the crowd of a lot of the other teams, but it's just that you've got maybe whatever it is, 10 or 15,000 in a 40 odd or 50 odd thousand seater stadium. So it doesn't look like there's that many people there. But then some of the other URC teams might have like a full stadium, but it's only like 5,000 or 6,000 people there. So, it was great to see that for that one. But again, I'm trying to keep this short, so we're just going to say Vodacom Bulls 25, Hollywoodbets Sharks 13 was the result of that one. Okay, now very, very briefly, we're going to talk about the final, because we're going to, as I said, we're going to have two previews of the final. Going to have one probably tomorrow. Like tomorrow is Tuesday, you might see it on Wednesday, because normally I kind of post later at night, and then one probably on Friday, because that's when the teams are going to come out as well. We'll look at the teams. So the grand final is Saturday, June the 14th. It's a 5 o'clock kickoff if you're watching in Ireland. I don't know what time is that, like maybe 7 o'clock in South Africa, but check your local time if you're South African. Don't rely on me, and say, oh, Mark told me the wrong time and I missed the kickoff or wherever. Check your local listings. But this was first versus second in the regular season. And, in terms of over the whole season, probably the best two teams in the competition. Obviously, Glasgow were up there for a long time, but kind of fell away towards the end. This one is at Croke Park in Dublin. So it's a special occasion. Anytime you can have rugby in the home of Gaelic games, should be a special occasion. Now, Leinster haven't been getting massive crowds to their games recently, and that's probably a lot to do with, fan fatigue in terms of Leinster just not delivering in big games. And I wonder now, will it change for this final? Because certainly the Bulls, for me, a big attraction for a final, and hopefully we're going to see big crowd there and a good atmosphere there as well. So if you're watching it on TV or online, the way I will be, unfortunately I won't be there at the game, but you can catch it on Premier Sport and in Ireland on TG Cahir. I'm sure there's plenty of other places you can catch it as well, like Now TV, and there's URC TV, etc. But should be a brilliant game, and again, we're going to touch on it more later in the week. Okay, so let me know what you thought about the semi-finals down in the comments.